I'm Eric Green, partner at Green and Sklar's, a boutique tax law firm and founder of the tax resolution training organization, Tax Rep LLC. Welcome to another edition of Tax Rep Network podcast. I want to thank our sponsors, Tax Help Software and Call ENQ. We've only taken podcast sponsors of products that we actually use at Green and Sklar's. Call ENQ is what allows us to call the government and get into the IRS in under 3 minutes. Tax Help Software is what we use to pull transcripts. It's our intelligent ordering where we track what's going on with our clients overnight. So in the morning, we know of anything that's happened on the IRS side, and also what we use for our resolution forms, our offers, installment agreements, uncollectible powers of attorney, all of that. Our sponsors have special offers for you. If you want to check them out, go to taxrepllc.com, resources, and TRN podcast page to view the sponsor offers. Enjoy the episode. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for Tax Rep Network. This week we have joining us Alex Robnett. Alex is the Chief Strategy Officer at Elementus, a blockchain data firm headquartered in New York. Before joining Elementus in 2019, Alex worked in institutional asset management with focuses ranging from private investments, public fixed income, venture capital, and derivatives, holding roles in front office, risk management, and operations for several insurers, including the Hartford, White Mountains Insurance Group, Symetra, and Nassau. Currently at Elementus, Alex focuses his efforts in communicating Elementus's superior ability to index blockchain information while handling business operations for a growing company. And that's why I wanted Alex on the program. You know, if you've been listening, we've had all the IRS people coming on talking about enforcement, right? We're going to enforce. There's a lot of good stuff that can be done with the blockchain technology, with I know cryptocurrency sounds negative, virtual currency. And so I'm very excited to have Alex on this week. So you have some background on him. He holds a BS in Business Administration from the University of Tennessee and a Master's of Finance from Fairfield University. And it's very funny, actually, the way we met. So first of all, Alex, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, for having me on. I've been looking forward to this for a while and excited to talk about the legitimate use cases of this weird stuff going on.
Well, yeah, you know, and what's funny, and we've, you did a webinar and a talk with Jay Marsh and Jeff Sklar's, my law partners, on this. The way I met Alex, if the last name is ringing a bell, Jim Robnett when I met him was the special agent in charge of the New York field office. He is now the deputy chief of IRS criminal investigations. And when he mentioned me, he said, you should have Alex, talk with you. And I said, well, what does he do? Because we were talking about virtual currency. And he said, oh, he does blockchain and virtual currency. I'm like, wait a minute. He said, no, he does legitimate stuff. And so I was like, okay. It's very funny. So Alex, I got all kinds of questions. So in an attempt to sort of keep this sort of coherent, we've had a litany of speakers on the podcast talking about the IRS concerns, right? Enforcement. We got, terrorists, Silk Road. Yep. The combination of using the Tor web browser, which you can't track people, along with virtual currency, and how they broke that case. I actually had Gary Alford, the special agent who broke it, on the program. The government has lots of concerns about this, both just from a global enforcement, terrorism and drug dealing and whatnot, but also to tax evasion and not being able to see who's doing what. And we're actually going to have some more folks from the IRS on talking about their use of data from the John Doe summonses of Coinbase. I don't know if you saw the headlines, they are fighting now with Kraken and Circle to get their information. So I think the audience has a good sense of why the IRS is upset about this and what they're doing about it. Can you explain, for those of us who don't really understand this, what it is? I mean, because you hear about blockchain, and I'll give you an example. To me, my understanding was that what made virtual currency safe, if you will, quote unquote, was everyone, like there are all these ledgers, and that basically there's a constant, there are constant ledgers being kept, so you can't like steal it. It can't vanish. That's what made it safe, is that there were so many kind of eyes on this thing. And then in Silk Road, you hear about 350,000 of Bitcoin being stolen. And I was like, well, how do you steal Bitcoin? And friends of mine have said, the Bitcoin thing is one thing, and everyone's, investing, whatever. Blockchain is going to change the world. And so I'm like, well, what is blockchain? And so I've attempted to watch this, and I don't get it. So I'm sure some of the people in the audience don't either. Can you explain to us what blockchain is, and why are people like you? I mean, what are you doing with this? I mean, what
Sure.
is the legitimate use of it?
Sure. So, there's a lot of buzzwords. I guess I'll start off, but with that preface, that's saying that there are a ton of buzzwords in this industry. But if we look at it from a high level, especially most of the folks in your audience, being accountants, we're all familiar with the concept of a ledger. Okay, in the realm of cryptocurrency, cryptocurrency runs on the technology, or on a decentralized technology. This idea of a decentralized ledger, which is blockchain technology, and so your analysis of it and kind of your descriptors of it are pretty close. But there's one ledger, amongst many different participants. And the idea is that without going through a centralized source, or let's say the master ledger, like the person that has the authority to, put inputs onto the chain or put inputs onto this ledger and have it as a master record, there is no need for a centralized source. So I, yourself, anyone else participating on this network can post a transaction. It then gets broadcasted onto the network. It's then confirmed by the stakeholders. And then once it's confirmed, it's added to the ledger and added in what we call blocks. So, and then there's chains of blocks. So then we can think about, okay, now you understand why it's called a blockchain. And that's really the crucial idea, is that the system has inherent trust. A few other buzzwords are like, blockchain is trustless, or that it's minimized trust. I like to think it has inherent trust. That the system itself is inherently trustworthy, because I don't have to put my faith into a central party, let's say a bank, to manage my debits and credits. In this system, along with the other participants, I can freely transmit value across this network without having to worry that, there would be errors in accounting. Someone's going to fat finger something. If there's any kind of discrepancy at all, whenever these blocks or these entries are confirmed by the network, those would be immediately recognized, and then they would be spit out. So on a very high level, that's kind of where I'd like to start. But what people really need to grasp is that Bitcoin is a form of blockchain technology. Bitcoin is also a form of cryptocurrency, and there's many different cryptocurrencies out there. Probably the two most popular right now are Bitcoin and Ethereum. Ethereum has a similar beginning. It's an offshoot of Bitcoin itself, but they have dual purposes. And I guess where I'd like to go in this conversation eventually is that there are legitimate use cases of this stuff, right? That's why I'm in business, and that's why my fellow colleagues at Elementus and I, and those of us in the industry, are so excited about this asset class. But also, again, Bitcoin and Ethereum serve different purposes. And I think that concept of something that holds value like that, and that's a form of virtual asset, is relatively new. But again, it's a very exciting time to be in this industry, certainly this year, with everything that we've heard, many more participants jumping in to space, legacy financial institutions finally starting to look at this stuff and realizing, okay, there's something here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can think of, because of what I do, I have clients who are under investigation, and I'll give you an example. They're under investigation for cash transactions, for, the filing of suspicious activity reports dealing in cash, which again today has sort of a nefarious, but the reality is this: they came from another culture, another place where there is no FDIC insurance. One of my clients in particular that got picked up on suspicious activity reports was explained to me, like, he's from the Ukraine. In the Ukraine, you really don't keep your money in a bank. You can put the money in the bank at 10 o'clock. That bank may be gone at noon. There is no FDIC insurance. I have clients from Iraq. You don't put your money in a bank. So Americans' reality of, well, why wouldn't you just put it in Chase Manhattan or Bank of America or TD Bank or whatever? Because they're in a country where they don't have that, where, they keeping it under the mattress and dealing in cash was just what you did. So there really is nothing nefarious about it. And because of that sort of experience, I'll give you another example. There's a bunch of guys I grew up with who became Navy SEALs. And I noticed getting together with them, I don't know if you find this interesting, they all have a Rolex. Every one of them has a Rolex. And at one point I commented, I'm like, you just get good deals on Rolexes when you're a Navy SEAL. And they said, well, actually, yeah, you get the duty free, whatever. But beyond that, they said, do you know what, and he points to his Rolex, you know what this is? What? He said, this is cash, no matter where I am. I can be in Paris or I could be in Kandahar. He said, if I need something, I can pull this off. And everybody from people working poppy fields in Afghanistan to downtown London knows what a Rolex is. So this can get me a car. It can buy my way across borders. It can get people to give me food. So he said, I'm not going to carry bundles of cash, and that they carry the Rolex. And I was like, I would not have thought of that because I normally don't have to barter for my life with my watch. But the point being, all of a sudden now I'm like, I understand the attraction of having virtual currency. If you're going to be moving in or traveling in countries where you can't just wire money to a bank and have faith that it'll still be there, I see the attraction of it. But that's not why you're in this. All right. So the blockchain technology can, again, so I kind of get what you're describing as far as the ledger. What is the use for legitimate businesses, which again normally would just wire money or whatever they're going to do? I know Elon Musk, they bought what Tesla, like 1.5 billion, which sounds like just an investment. What does the blockchain technology do for a business?
Yeah, sure. And that's a good question. And it sounds like you surround yourself with some pretty powerful people. So I will be sure not to get on the wrong side with you. So there's a litany of things that, most of them are probably, in the near term future, as it relates to cryptocurrency. So thinking about blockchain use cases that deal with moving capital, a borderless idea of methods for anyone in the world to transact with me. And again, I don't have to go through a financial intermediary to do that. Other use cases maybe outside of that for blockchain technology, I mean, like it or not, the world is becoming more connected, through digital means. We now carry computers in our pockets. The size of these would be, and what they're capable of would be unfathomable even 10, 15 years ago. We're now at like this peak of, point of technological acceleration that surely, not only with blockchain technology, and I don't think blockchain technology is like the one key ingredient, but it is a major ingredient with how it's going to change lives and obviously become this powerful platform for many different things to be built upon. So when we think about legitimate use cases for this, one in the form of assets. So again, it's this idea of I can use a stateless currency, and if I need to transact with an individual that may be in one of these countries where they don't have deposit insurance, they may be unable to go for what is now the world's reserve currency in USD. Just depending on whatever is going on in their own domestic, circumstances, we can transact as long as they're connected to a computer and they have an address on the blockchain where they have access to, and they can transact value. I can transact value with them. I think a lot of financial institutions are looking at this space, certainly from a portfolio diversification methodology. Like it's just a way to diversify an already well diversified portfolio if you want to add some money in this space, because there's so much money being poured in and there's a lot of innovation happening. Whether most of that will come and bear fruit. It's a typical innovation environment where there's a lot of money and there's a lot of good ideas, some really good, and most of them really good, some of them maybe not so good. So there's that. There's the opportunity for portfolio diversification, and then we think about maybe use cases outside of assets. Again, the world is becoming more connected. If we're working with automated systems like machine learning, artificial intelligence, and then the bandwidth that helps us do all this, 5G, right? I feel like all of those things combined with blockchain are really going to create a world where now I'm thinking of, I have more access to my own personal information on whatever the next generation of the web is. Like we've already seen some of these centralized structures that have been built around, our contemporary web environment, Google, Facebook, Amazon. These are immense companies that hold, a lot of personal information from the masses. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I could see blockchain technology offering the opportunity, and again, it being one of the ingredients that leads us down this path. But with its decentralized nature, I see it allowing us to kind of reclaim our ownership of private data, right? And again, it all boils down just to the basics of being able to transact on a network without having to go through a central party. All these transactions that are occurring on the Bitcoin network right now, these are all transactions that are occurring, somewhat autonomously between groups of people, individuals, and then those transactions are confirmed by, what are called miners that add those blocks to the chain. I think, and again, that's at a very high level, and I want to try to keep it at a high level, but I'm more than happy to kind of go down into details for your audience. But there's a lot of moving pieces right now, but I think this idea, we already transact value every single day on networks, okay? The internet is a vast network. It runs on a protocol called TCP/IP, which I'm sure some of us may be familiar with, but the majority of us aren't, okay? We just, right now, Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're the windows into this central network that help us make use of that, right? You're going to see companies emerging, within the next couple of years that are now working on decentralized networks, and the complicatedness of how the structure and how these blocks are formed and how the underpinnings of blockchain actually work. I think that mystery is kind of going to die away, and really from the initial layer, whatever that window is going to be a little bit more popular for people, and it's going to be in like a more of a seamless environment. So hopefully that answered your question. Again, it's a fast moving industry, and I think there are legitimate use cases of this stuff, for sure, especially on the cryptocurrency side. But the real value is blockchain itself, the technology, and it may not be sexy. It may not be as attractive as like when the prices go way up and down. And you see it on CNBC, and the talking heads on there get all excited. But a lot of the stuff that drives our value, a lot of the technology that's created the internet as we know it today, was not stuff that gripped headlines, right? It was only the infrastructure that was built on top of that was really what created a lot of value, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. I mean, what I'm hearing is, one is you don't have the centralized aspect. Now, again, I think for most legitimate companies, do they care if Bank of America knows they're sending money here, there, wherever? But there is about, and what's interesting is I was just talking to people who are app developers. Yes, I'm working on a tax prep network app, who talked about the fact that why should you give your information and your let's say your group's information in your Facebook group to Facebook to then go sell to your competitors?
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea of anonymity, but not in a nefarious way, just in why should Amazon and Facebook and everybody know everything about me, probably even more than I even know about myself. And so I kind of get that. Is there any other reason for the idea of the blockchain? Like you started to talk about the decentralized aspect of companies, right? Of businesses. And you're not the only one who's brought that up. It's now probably 3-4 years ago. NYU, the Stern School, did a full day program on the future state of the digital workforce. And they were arguing, but they were making the argument that eventually the world will be much more like LinkedIn, meaning, why do I have to have 10,000 square feet and 25 people sitting here? What if Eric Green can go out and say, look, I got this big project. I'm going to go and I'll message Alex. I'm going to message Jim. I'll get Jeff and pull together my dream team, work on whatever project it is, and then job's done. We're all off doing whatever. That effectively they're saying there's a good chance that many Americans are going to find that they're independent contractors. Whether they want to be or not, they're going to be. And so the point from Stern being, you're going to have to take responsibility for your own training. You're keeping up your skills, staying on top of things, marketing yourself. You're going to become an army of one. So that's sort of a vision for where we could be in 20 years, combined with what I'm hearing from you. They seem sort of very, you're singing the same tune.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I would argue that the environment that they described is may have been kickstarted within the past 12 months. I mean, certainly so.
Well, I agree. Anytime through world history, the Black Death in Europe, anytime you have a major sort of an event like that, what I think COVID did isn't change anything. It is accelerating what already happened. We were already using Zoom. We were already doing Microsoft Teams, but there was a lot of resistance to it. I can tell you, major conferences, they weren't going to do that stuff. You make people come there. Well, all of a sudden now everything's possible.
Yeah.
Right. What they kept saying, no. Lawyers, I have partners who were like, no. You got to be in the office. Well, guess what? We couldn't be in the office. The firm is still here.
Yeah.
Honestly, 2020 was a great year.
Yeah.
And so I do think that COVID is probably going to be, as you said, is going to be sort of, I don't know if it kicked it off, but it is going to accelerate what was kind of slowly already happening. I think it's going to be fascinating to see where all this goes. But now to go diving into the weeds with blockchain, aside from being able to move money without the government knowing.
I like how you word that.
Well, when you say to me, I can deal with whomever, decentralized. There's the citizen aspect of me that's like, well, why would you want to do that? Now, again, being an American, growing up in America, I don't fear Bank of America is watching me through my computer. The IRS. I don't have those. What I would have said are irrational fears, but there are some people they're not irrational to. Yeah. In other parts of the world that are not like here, I see the attraction of it immediately. If you were living under Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, and with a banking system that is, if it even exists, is probably corrupt.
Yeah,
I totally get it. So, but for US companies, is it more that you can now deal with those people and it makes life easier? Or is there some other reason to do it here?
Yeah, I still, so first off, there's a lot to unpack there. So the blockchain, let's say Bitcoin, for instance, right? The Bitcoin, I mean, these cryptocurrencies are actually, if you look online, if you go to any blockchain explorer for Bitcoin, for instance, and what that means, it's pretty much like a glorified spreadsheet. You're going to see all the transactions that have ever recorded and transactions that are occurring in real time. So this stuff is fairly transparent, right? The key though is that there's so much of it. It's like an assault of information, and really, when you get down to the granular details, the blockchain data itself is very hard to read. And actually, this is something we focus on at Elementus, is that we reformat this data out of its native schema and make it so that anyone can walk up and utilize the information as they see fit. And right now, the use cases for that, the immediate use cases for cryptocurrency and some of our partners in law enforcement, and then partners in the financial services, are investigations for law enforcement, right? The regulatory bodies, so they can get a better idea of what's going on in much greater detail and much greater fidelity, I would say, than most of other providers. And as well in the financial services, it's kind of the reverse of that. Let's say a law enforcement agent may have an address, they know it's tied to criminal activity, they want to see where the funds go. We help them see in totality immediately where those funds have gone, so that they can, enhance their investigative capabilities. For compliance and financial services, it's somewhat the reverse of that. So we look at the full provenance of funds. So what that means is, if I'm running a legitimate business, banking business, and I decide to get into cryptocurrency, one of the biggest concerns I have is dealing with OFAC sanctioned countries, right? The last thing I want to touch is a sanctioned entity and take on money, right? It's just I'm going to invite questions from the Treasury Department, which I do not want to have to deal with. So we can help identify that with great accuracy and with great clarity. So those concerns are still there, and I don't think from like a, my small anecdote, or like small example on like legitimate use cases for this technology, being able to transact with almost anyone anywhere in the world, on in a decentralized way. That's I don't think a lot of businesses want to be dealing with folks exclusively out of Iran or North Korea, right?
Right.
But there's other facets of that. Not only, can they help, like with our help, they can help screen those transactions, but it's another method of sharing capital and maybe an invested assets that they want to help manage or hold custody over. But then there's a lot of programs, I would say applications that are being built on Ethereum, for instance, I don't know if you've heard of this, but DeFi, like decentralized finance, is this idea of lending programs that work and are executed on the Ethereum network, which again is a separate blockchain than Bitcoin, but it's still its own cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. There's these applications that offer, the same types of lending services that you would be able to, utilize at a bank, at like a traditional bank. But the idea here is that through Ethereum's smart contracts, any kind of veering off the path of what your agreed terms are with whatever the lending terms are, because this is a smart contract, if you miss a payment, or if you're nefarious with your activity, your lending program can be immediately shut down because it's all executed, in autonomous code on the Ethereum network. And again, that's kind of like a high level description, but the DeFi space has exploded in the past year. Very similar to, if some of your listeners are familiar with ICOs. I think I talked about ICOs when I was at the conference with you a couple of years ago, how these things exploded, and SEC was looking at these as like unregistered securities, right? And certainly I'm not comparing the two as that, SEC should be looking at these the same way, but the explosion, the interest in the DeFi space is very similar to ICOs in that, wow, this is like we kind of rode the wave up from ICOs thinking about, wow, cryptocurrencies and how tokens are run on Ethereum is a new way of running capital and having your own economies built in these blockchain networks, which can, if you leave anyone to their imagination, they can kind of think about how to utilize these assets. But now DeFi is coming to the space, and I mean they can be, there's legitimate competitors to the traditional methods of lending, which again I think are, if we go with the example of moving towards a decentralized community of people, in 10 to 20 years, I really think that, because these systems can enforce whatever lending contracts that are constructed or written within computer code autonomously, these are going to become more popular. In a way, I would say there's much less counterparty risk than I would have at a traditional bank if I was lending out to someone, and then they missed a payment, then I have to pay lawyers to go into the process of litigation, and 12 months later I still haven't recouped my principal. In fact, that's one of the things that, coming from the private investment world, when I was really getting, I think it was like 2018 that my fascination was really blossoming with blockchain technology. And for those of you who aren't aware, in private placements, when you're dealing with private debt, of investing in private companies, investing on the capital table in forms of secured debt. One of the most popular things you really want to make sure you get right are these financial covenants, right? Is this company going to go below an EBITDA limit? And if they do, that's going to trigger a higher interest rate. Most of the time for, right in the line of investment grade companies, like if they did that, they would have no problem triggering that interest rate, and we wouldn't have to get the lawyers involved. But sometimes these situations would get rather contentious. And again, if we were in the realm of a smart contract, we wouldn't even have to worry. that risk right there would be all but eliminated. Or I would say it would be almost entirely eliminated. And so we wouldn't have to have that, uncertainty of like, okay, well, they went below their EBITDA limit. Now we have to bring in the lawyers. Now we have to go fight in court and show them like that this is what we agreed on, and things like that. So a little bit down the rabbit hole there, but
it could all be automated.
Yeah.
It could all be automated. No, I do see it. And so look, a couple things. First of all, thank you for coming on and explaining this. You do, just for the audience before we wrap up, you do consult. I know right now, you're working with Elementus, but you also do other consulting as well. If we have folks listening to this who they or their clients want to get a hold of you to look at stuff like this, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So again, at Elementus, we're open to helping and kind of pushing this industry towards maturity, and really looking at the value of this as holistically. So any entities out there, that are interested in compliance services or investigative needs for cryptocurrency right now, the best way to reach out to me in that capacity would be alex@elementus.io, and we'll probably put the email in the description of this episode. And the other method that's easy to get in touch with me is I'm on LinkedIn, so it's fairly easy to find me there. And it took me a long time to have a Twitter account, but you know what, Eric, I created one this morning just for you, because that whole space, that Twitter space, is like the last social media that I had not really touched that at all. But I figured, what the heck, I'll go ahead and dive in there. So that DMs there might be easiest, but I also have a personal email, which I'd be more than happy to share after a conversation with someone. So
I have to tell you when I held off on getting on Twitter until so many people asked me about it, that I was like, what do I want a Twitter handle for? I mean, I don't know what I'm even going to do with it. We make fairly large use of it. We put out anything new that's breaking or the events coming up. It is useful to have.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, I absolutely will put Alex's information down below. And you can certainly get a hold of him. And if you or your clients need him. So final question, Alex, can you give us an idea in the next 3 years what you think this space is going to look like?
Yeah.
I never invested in Bitcoin. I figured it would be gone. I figured it was one of these 2-year things. DOJ will put them out of business. That's the end of it, right? They're all criminals. And I got a whole bunch of friends that are now working for, like you, working for companies where this may not be the thing they do, but it is certainly an element of what they do. Do you have some sense on maybe, I mean, it doesn't have to be 3 years, but in the near future, where does this go?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a couple of developments, recently. The big one here is U.S. House of Representatives recently passed, I think it's HR 1602. It's called Eliminate Barriers to Innovation Act of 2021. That's a huge step in that them recognizing that, okay, cryptocurrency here to stay, believe it or not. And we need to start taking a look at this seriously and stop trying to fit, a square peg into a round hole. And what I mean by that is trying to fit cryptocurrency into an asset class or recognizing it as something that it is not. Right now, IRS recognizes it as property or real estate, or as like kind of like a real estate transaction. It's far from that. We should probably look at this and get things started on the legislative side where we're looking at this in more of a holistic way and realizing that it's unique. So that's one good start that's going to kick off, I think, hopefully open-mindedness towards this industry. The second thing I'd like to point out is that you're going to see further declines and probably less news of how Bitcoin is tied to nefarious activity, because this is actually something we can see quite clearly. And my company Elementus recently released just a quick clip of this, but Bitcoin transactions that are directly tied to illicit activity are actually less than 1% of total transaction volume. It's a very small amount, which is, again, if you're looking at the news, you wouldn't think that, but that's in fact true. And I would say that that's smaller than, maybe the criminals out there that are probably utilizing another form of currency, cash, or USD for that matter. So that's something to remember there. So I kind of wanted to make those points that at least the government's on the right track. And then I think we're beginning to recognize that this stuff is somewhat legitimate. Where I see things going are kind of, there's like three big movements I see right now. And one is that, regulatory compliance, exchange compliance, those are going to be hot topics coming into the next year. So whether that's with decentralized finance and how those decentralized forms of exchanges that don't hold custody over customer assets, a customer actually has the custody of that's what that means. Whether those start to become, propagate in popularity and have to conform to some type of regulation, or the major exchanges like Coinbase, which just recently had their direct listing, a great sign for the industry overall. Coinbase, Gemini, other big exchanges like Binance that they're on a more of a global scale. I think they're going to come under more regulatory pressure, and they're going to realize I think hopefully they'll figure out a way to cooperate with regulatory authorities so that it's not a one-sided deal here. I don't think the industry it's never going to conform to all regulation. There's going to have to be some learning on either side. So I think that's going to be a trend. The second trend that I would say is that there's going to be what drives that regulatory compliance might be some consolidation in the market. If an exchange doesn't comply, it's going to be forced out in a way. I don't know what that actual diminishment might be in scale or size, but I can see that with the greater interest and the more competency of regulatory bodies. And I will say that, we speak with every major law enforcement agency right now. We speak to at Elementus, the same on the regulatory side. These guys and girls know their stuff. So, and it's their interest and their excitement about the space too, which is I want to make clear is very high. So they know what they need to look for, and I think if an exchanges are going to comply, there's probably going to be some consolidation or maybe some buyout opportunity there too. And then I think the third thing are going to be what I call blossoming kind of side projects along blockchain that are somewhat related to cryptocurrency. They're probably more directly related to cryptocurrency now, but then are the bridge to considering, okay, how can I apply a blockchain technology outside of a form of asset? And the big one right now are these ideas of NFTs, right? Non-fungible tokens. Another terminology that's probably garnered attention on like the volatile price factor, right? Why is this person selling, a $250,000 million painting or $1 million digital painting as an NFT? That's crazy. The NFT market, I think, will be the first step in bridging like tangible consumer products, like clothing lines, tradable, like collectibles, things like that. There's a lot of different verticals in the space that can enter through NFTs, and that's going to be an incredible bridge of this technology that finally pushes it towards the mainstream, where now I'm transacting. Now I'm actually I'm able to consume electronic media on my phone, right? And it's not just a copy of a copy of a copy. No, it's a legitimate authorized copy. And I can trace the lineage of that ownership across a decentralized ledger, across a blockchain. So that's going to add value to that as well as to what I have on my phone. So I think there's three big movements there. Again, the regulatory compliance, consolidation of the environment as it relates to exchanges, and then NFTs. And I think overall, though, what I would like to see is kind of approach of, financial education is lackluster. I mean, we can all agree on that, at least in the US. I feel like more people should probably be better financially educated. Mm-hmm. Right now, there's an incredible opportunity to, as virtual currencies kind of propagate throughout the world and throughout our own streets, there's an incredible time now to take advantage of that and show people like, this stuff is legitimate. More businesses are getting on top of it. Regulatory compliance is coming in. But if you still don't trust a bank, or if you're considered unbanked, which I think is, again, another buzzword that I like to avoid, but someone who doesn't have assets in a traditional banking environment, there's an opportunity there to educate those people. So I think what I'd like to see is more of an attempt to, welcome those people into the fold, educate them about what Bitcoin is, and really, in 5 to 10 years, they'll be bootstrapped and ready to go in this new digital economy. So, and hopefully that happens soon, and Elementus will be right along with all those folks.
Yeah, no. And no, I think it is, it's very cool. I mean, it really is, and that maybe this is my final thought, but do you remember a quote? And I don't remember his name, and I don't remember the exact year, but it must have been around 1910, 1920, 1930, around there. The person who ran the patent office for the US, do you remember this quote? That basically everything that has been patented and created has been. and I always think about that when, you said, you can't see me right now if you're listening to this, but I'm holding up my smartphone, which has more power than the computers they used to send the shuttle to the moon. I mean, it's mind blowing to me. I mean, somebody thought this up. Yeah. Somebody dreamt this in their dorm room or wherever, of cryptocurrency, of Coinbase, of, that person should be the president of the United States because he's clearly far more brilliant than I am. And, it's amazing to me. And it's going to be fascinating to see where, like I told you, I assumed that this was, would I invest in cryptocurrency? And by the way, look at the kids that did. Oh yeah, I put $1,000 in it, like when it first started. Now I have 5 million, in Bitcoin. But it really is. It may change the world.
Yeah, I would say it already has. It just hasn't affected as many people yet as it will. But the day that the internet was born was the day that solidified virtual currency, because you cannot eliminate virtual currency. It is here to stay, no matter what they tell you. The only way to eliminate that would be to shut down the internet in reality, and that's just That's just not going to happen anymore. I mean,
listen,
if I did that,
the U.S. population lose its mind.
Exactly. I mean, how am I going to share all those sweet TikTok videos of mine, right? Yeah. So, listen, Eric, this was really good. I appreciate you inviting me on. And I mean, I'd love to talk about this stuff. And I know there's a couple of topics, we wanted to discuss, but I'm always open to any questions anyone has, anyone out there that's looking to learn more about the space or specific questions. I'm more than happy to help. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no. And Alex and everyone listening, aside from working on a tax rep app, we had planned a conference and then COVID hit. But we had talked about a conference talking about the future state of business, of the tax world, of whatever. And this is, I think it is going to change. Like you said, it already has, but it just hasn't trickled down yet to everybody. No, I think this is a topic we're going to keep bringing you back, and we're going to keep going over, because I think a year from now it'll have changed again, and it really is amazing. And the government, who was struggling initially, they're trying to keep up. But it is, I think, a good sign that Congress at least has looked at this and said, "Look, what are we doing here? We're fighting against the tide. It's not going anywhere." We'll see what happens. But it does sound like it's. I wouldn't say it's maturing yet, but it's certainly those normal steps you see in something maturing are starting, right? Congress is accepting it. The listing of it, it's becoming a real mainstream thing.
Yeah, you have, and I will say, Coinbase having a direct listing, in U.S. markets isn't the flag that we've staked in the ground to claim ownership, right? Like these emerging fintech companies, these emerging crypto companies, but it's definitely turning some heads at some major financial institutions who have realized, okay, and maybe they have the innovator's dilemma now. Like how are they going to get into the space? But the next couple of years are going to be really, really exciting. And, I'm just hoping that everyone approaches it from an open mind, right? And realizes the benefits of it, that aren't just for, it's not going to make the process of me buying a pizza easier. I really think where this stuff is going to go is this idea of individual sovereignty. Like, I can finally have control not only of my assets, but of my personal information again. And it's not going to happen overnight. Just like I tell Bitcoin maximalists, like, you're not going to burn down the financial sector overnight. And that's not going to happen. But it's going to be a balance of those two things. And we're just all, especially all of us at Elementus, the rest of us at the industry, we're really excited about where this is going to go. And it's been a great year so far. So hopefully 2021 keeps on ticking strong.
Yeah. I think it will. Just don't lose your key or your password or whatever.
I know. Yeah, we didn't get to touch on that. It's that'll be a topic for another day. But
that is one downside. You lose your password. Is it called the key?
It's called a private key. Yeah, that's the only way that it's really the only way stuff can get stolen right now. Through social engineering, you can phish people for their private passwords. But it's just like me losing my apartment key. If I didn't have my apartment key, I could never get back into my apartment. That's the idea.
You could go buy an axe, but the point. Yeah. But the point being is that if you, and we've heard those crazy stories of like someone throwing away the computer with $200 million of virtual currency on it.
Yeah, and they never recovered. Yeah.
That would be depressing.
Yes, it would.
All right, now, Alex, listen, thank you for doing this, and everyone, thank you for listening in. I am going to put Alex's contact information down below. If you're one of your clients want to get a hold of him, by all means. And Alex was at our annual event. It was a year ago, January. We did the live with we filled the room with accountants here in Connecticut, in New Haven. And I suspect you'll be seeing more of Alex and certainly having him on the show. Listen, thank you for doing this again, taking the time. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the education. And listen, Alex, thank you very much. Everyone, thank you for listening. And we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks again, Eric. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. If you haven't already subscribed to the Tax Rep Network podcast, go to taxrepllc.com, mouse over resources, and click TRN podcast. You'll get an account loaded with all the episodes, our sponsor offers, and transcripts of recent podcast episodes. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to our sponsors, Call ENQ and Tax Help Software. See you on the next episode.